My name is Edward Gross. I am a business lawyer. Perhaps the most common question asked of individuals who come to us to set up their business is, should I be a corporation or a limited liability company, commonly known as an LLC? The purpose of this video is to discuss the differences between these two types of entities. I will focus on Virginia law, but the principles that I discuss are generally correct throughout the United States. There is a link at the bottom of this video to a chart which discusses in more detail the differences between these two types of entities. Of course, it is always best to check with a local attorney and a CPA before you decide whether to be a corporation or an LLC. Both corporations and LLCs can provide personal liability protection to the owners. That is to say, the owners will not be responsible for the debts or the obligation of the entity. Owners can become responsible for those obligations through a process called piercing the corporate veil, but that will be the subject of another video. Corporations are owned by shareholders who can be individuals or companies. The shareholders elect the board of directors, who in turn elect the officers. The officers run the day-to-day operations of the corporation and report back to the board of directors, who then report to the shareholders. For small companies, the shareholders, officers, and board of directors can be one individual or the few individuals that own the corporation. LLCs are owned by members who can be individuals or companies. The members then elect a board of managers or a manager member to run the day-to-day operations of the LLC. Managers can take titles such as president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, as does a corporation, but that is not necessary. For a corporation, the bylaws will control how the corporation operates. For example, the bylaws will determine how the board of directors are elected, how officers are elected, and other important issues involving the corporation. The shareholders of a corporation should enter into a shareholders agreement which restricts the transfer of shares and governs other issues between the shareholders, such as buyouts and issuance of stock to new shareholders. In an LLC, the operating agreement should address all of the same issues as the bylaws and shareholders agreement in a corporation, including how the company is managed and how member interests are issued and transferred. If an LLC does not have an operating agreement, the Virginia Code will control, which I do not recommend. For both corporations and LLC, Virginia law allows owners a great deal of latitude with regard to the adoption of agreements that will control the operation of the entity. However, LLCs have greater flexibility in that regard. What are the advantages of a corporation? Corporations are better suited for larger businesses due to the fact that it is easier to issue shares of stock than membership interests in an LLC in case of sales and transfers. Corporate statutory and case law is more developed than for LLCs. There's more uniformity between states with respect to the governance of corporations. The disadvantages of a corporation is that there are more formalities that must be maintained. There is less flexibility with regard to the distribution of profits and losses to shareholders. They are not as flexible with regard to the control and management. And perhaps the biggest disadvantage for a corporation is that a corporation must file and pay corporate income tax unless there is a sub-S election. A C corporation requires much more planning in order to avoid double taxation, wherein the corporation is taxed and the owners are also taxed. Next, I will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the LLC. One of the major advantages of an LLC is that it does not pay corporate tax. It can pass on the losses of the LLC to its owners, but of course the owners also will have to pay on the profits of the LLC. The LLC operating agreement can be drafted to suit the owners, which results in much more flexibility with regard to distribution of income and management of the LLC. The LLC typically has fewer formalities, including the annual reports that are required of a corporation. Unlike a corporation in Virginia, the LLC is not required to hold annual meetings or to advise the State Corporation Commission of the names and addresses of its members and managers. Therefore, there's a lot more anonymity in an LLC for its owners. The main disadvantage of the LLC is that it's not suited for large businesses with many investors or owners because the transfer of ownership interests in the LLC is much more complicated. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I wish you great success in your new business. Our law firm, Gross & Romanick, has extensive experience setting up LLCs and corporations throughout the United States. If you need a lawyer to help you make the decision regarding what entity to establish and to do the legal work, please consider our firm. You can learn more about us at gross.com or call us at 703-273-1400.